Welcome to Wining and Dining with Jim White. It's the program devoted to introducing you to the people who make the eats and drinks you love. And Paula Lambert, our favorite guest gourmet, back with us on the program. Paula, it's been an astounding month and such a joy to have the opportunity to spend time with you.
It's been great. I've just loved it. And you've had the best guests.
We even have a special guest gourmet joining us on the show today, the lovely and talented Ms. VICKI BRILEY-WHITE, my beautiful wife. Hello, my dear.
Hello. I'm so happy to be here with Paula because I want to be just like Paula when I grow up.
We really have enjoyed your wine segments through the month, and we thank you so much for contributing to the program. And throughout the show, we're just going to talk to Paula. And so if you got something you want to add, love to have you do that, Vicki.
Perfect.
Okay. Paula, you've kind of, for folks who have been following the show and being with us through the month, you've had a chance to kind of talk a little bit about some cheese and bread pairings and some great cooking tips. You even helped Anastasia Quinones learn how to actually make a queso, which was not something she had in her upbringing. But you're just a wealth of fun and talent, and your Mozzarella Company is really something for us to be celebrating. So talk a little bit about your inspirations for that and how it came to be, because you're such a great treasure for us and for folks anywhere who get your cheeses.
Well, I have just had the most wonderful life. I went to study Italy. I've just had the most wonderful life. I went to study Italian in Italy and fell in love with the country. And then years later, I wanted to figure out how I could go to Italy more often. And I came up with the idea of the Mozzarella Company and started it just to make fresh mozzarella for my mozzarella and tomato salad. And 36 years later, it's still going, and we have lots and lots of different cheeses, and I've had a wonderful time. I've written the cookbooks. I've begun taking people on trips to France and then to Italy and Ireland, and it's just great. I don't know how it could be any better.
I must suppose, I've seen this, but I'll ask the question. It seems as if it takes a great team, a support staff with you at Mozzarella Company to allow you the freedom to be off and to take these trips.
Yes, the staff at the Mozzarella Company is absolutely incredible. Maurizio and Ross just run the whole company, and Octavia and Carmen and all the wonderful cheesemakers that have been with me, some of them over 34 years, are irreplaceable.
Would you talk a little bit about that cheese process? And you're really utilizing some old world techniques in producing a new world product.
Everything we do is by hand. We begin with raw milk that we get straight from the farms, and we pasteurize it ourselves, and then add cultures and rent it and convert the milk into different kinds of cheese. At first, we were making all Italian cheeses, fresh mozzarella, mascarpone, ricotta, things like that. And then we got into goat cheeses. Then I was influenced by the chefs, Stephen and Dean and Robert Del Grande, who were cooking Southwestern cuisine, Mark Miller, all the people. And so I started putting chilies and herbs into the cheese. Then I went to Mexico with Patricia Quintana. Then I went to Greece for feta. Then I went to France, and I've learned century-old cheese-making techniques and brought them back and taken some of these techniques and updated them in a special way. For instance, we make that goat cheese that's wrapped with the hoja santa leaf, and that was a leaf that I had tried in Mexico at a party that Patricia had, and she wrapped chicken and fish in the leaf and steamed it in a pit underground. And I thought, well, I'm just going to wrap it around my goat cheese, and I did. And it just is the most wonderful, delicious thing. So it's old world and new world. And it's just things like that have been such an enjoyment.
It's you mentioned a lot of luminaries and people that you've shared a lot of wonderful experiences with. Someone that I know played a major role in in not only fun but culinary situations for you, Julia Child. Talk a bit about your friendship with Julia.
I was so lucky that I knew people along the way that were friends of Julia Child's, and I began to do many things with her and enjoy her company. She was so accepting of young people. I was young next to her, and she was also so interested in what everyone was doing. She felt that she was the most important she felt that she was a real professional, and she felt that her TV work and her writing were very, very important, and she wanted to be the best she could at her craft. And she would attend meetings and seminars, always trying to get better at what she did. She was very, very special.
Vicki and I had the pleasure of spending some time with Julia in Aspen. She was still very, very active and promoting products and sharing her expertise and her wonderful personality with the food and wine world. And a little tip or a little tidbit of nostalgia here, or trivia, if you will. Julia was the very first guest I ever had on my old KRLD restaurant show back many, many, many years ago. It was 20 years ago or more that our old friend and dearly departed wine guy Daryl Beeson told me that Julia was staying at the mansion where he worked as sommelier. Did I want to come over and interview her? So I sat with Julia in her suite at the mansion for about an hour using, old funky cassette tape technology. And she was just so charming and wonderful. And every time we saw her, even though I will say with all respect and love, the last few times we saw her memory was fading, and she was a different Julia, but still always delightful and wonderful. So I think everybody who has met her has got a wonderful, warm story in their heart about her.
Well, we were so lucky here in Dallas. She used to come for the AIWF events, the American Institute of Wine and Food, and she was here a lot. I mean, we were lucky.
She liked to drink beer and eat barbecue with Matt Martinez, I think.
and she loved Sonny Bryan's, and they would always send her barbecue for her birthday, which was August the 15th. And she would be in Maine, and Sonny Bryan's would send that barbecue up there to her.
That's great. You mentioned the chefs and those Southwest chefs, Dean and I'm trying to think, Ann Lindsay Greer and Robert Del Grande, Abner Samuel was a part of that, Stephen, all that team. Take us back to that time when you all were tasting different things to put in these cheeses. Is there an interesting story about the first time that happened, or what you all thought?
There are so many stories. I was the delivery girl, and I went around in my little truck, and I would make the cheese, and then I would run out while the cheese was maturing and make the deliveries. And I was just fascinated to see what Stephen and Dean especially were putting, how they were cooking with these chilies and herbs that none of us in Dallas had ever heard of. And they were finding out about these things, and they were saying they were indigenous. And I'd say, well, I'm just going to put those in my cheese. And so I'd run back and I'd make a batch of cheese and put some of these chilies and herbs in there. And we still make the one with the Mexican marigold mint that I learned from Stephen. And we still make the Ancho chili cachotta that I came up with from Dean. I mean, it was just a happy time. Everything was new and exciting, and they were open to trying my things, and I was open to getting their advice. It was wonderful. And to think that that's, 35 years ago, that's shocking.
Mm-hmm. That really is. I don't think there will ever be a time of camaraderie like that.
It was just wonderful. We were all so young and so happy. And Stephen, I went in to try to sell him mozzarella at the Ruth Street Cafe, and he wasn't interested. He said he wanted goat cheese. Well, that's because he'd been out there in California at the great chefs at Mondavi, and he knew about Laura Chanel and her goat cheese. So I went down to the state fair and found a lady with some goat milk and started making the goat cheese and he started buying it. I mean, we were all pretty young.
Well, you have to adjust with the market influences, don't you?
Yeah.
You were the first artisan cheese in Texas, maybe in the Southwest, but you really have fostered or shepherded or shown by example an industry that has just grown exponentially since then. Talk about that a little.
Well, it's grown dramatically, and yes, I was the only one in this whole part of the country. There was Laura Chanel in California and Letty Kilmoyer in Massachusetts, and a man in Illinois, and that was about all there were back in 1982. And it's been great to see the interest that people have had in cheese. The knowledge of cheese has grown dramatically. One time I heard years and years ago, oh, cheese is just 25 years behind wine. In 25 years, it'll really be something. Well, it happened.
It's been 25 years, hasn't it? And it is something. Well, as a kid growing up in Oak Cliff, Texas, cheese to us was a Kraft American slice or maybe some Velveeta. And then if we really were lucky, they'd melt that with some peppers and some, anyway, and we'd have that Rotel dip or whatever that mess of manufactured cheese stuff was. My point in all of this is the evolution in cheese, the change in taste. Is that because food and wine have just become so much more important to people over the years? Why do you think?
Well, yes. I mean, it's all together. You have people that are traveling more. You have many, many restaurants that are influencing people. You have the TV Food Network. We have the Jim White radio show. All of these things are creating great interest in the public, and they are more anxious to try things. I mean, it's just an evolution.
Now, how does American cheese stack up against European cheese?
Well, I think that some of the American cheeses are superior to some of the European cheeses now. We have a lot of very creative cheesemakers who are creating and making fantastic cheeses, and a lot of cheeses from the United States are now being exported to foreign countries.
So you went to learn Italian in Italy and wound up making cheese.
That's exactly right.
How's your Italian?
Molto buono.
Well, I suppose this comes in handy on these trips that you sponsor.
Oh, yes. I just got so lucky. After I wrote that first cookbook in 2000, I was invited to go to France to teach at a cooking school called La Combe, and it was in the Périgord region. And I spent 10 years taking people there. And then in 2011, I began my own company called Viaggi Deliziosi. That means delicious trips in Italian. And I take people to Tuscany to stay in a farmhouse. It's a fabulous villa. And I show them all around Tuscany, the wine, the food, the castles, the villages. And now I take people to Puglia, which is down in the heel of the boot of Italy. And then I take people to Ireland, to Lismore Castle. I go on cruises on the Silver Seas with Stephen Piles. We're going to Cuba. We've been to South America. And it's all just because of this wonderful interest I've had in cheese.
That's delightful. Let's talk more about your trips, because you have some coming up in the fall that people might be able to avail themselves of.
Yes. On October 19th, I'm taking people to Puglia, and it is down there in the heel of the boot, and it is just a wonderful, wonderful area of Italy. It's like Greece and Sicily all combined. The major town is called Lecce, Lecce, and it's a Baroque town full of gorgeous churches and palaces, and we go there and we explore that part. We go down and see the towns to the south where they're growing the olive oil. They have trees in Puglia that are 1,500 years old. These olive trees are incredible. And then they have the little buildings that are called Truly. They're little conical shaped houses with little pointy roofs, and we visit those. one of the best things about Puglia is the vegetables that they grow there, and they have just a wide array. And often you'll go for dinner or lunch, and they'll serve you like 10 different vegetables as the first course. It's delicious. I just love it. And their wines, they make all those delicious wines. They have delicious red wines and wonderful white wines. I mean, it's all good. Everything about it is great. And I love it.
You know, it's so interesting. Of course, people were always raving about their trips to Italy and France and so forth. They come back and they say, oh my goodness, the food, oh, the wines, they were splendiferous, they were magical. And I think in many cases they were, but in most cases people were simply overlooking the fact that they were locally grown, locally sourced, and a smaller harvest put together with the right food and wine pairing. What do you think about that?
Well, I think you're right. One thing that I've always thought is interesting is, remember back in the 80s when we had California cuisine, and that was the whole deal? That was just Italian food or food from the south of France. I mean, and they've always championed the fresh things, the seasonal things. The wines have always been small manufacturers. I mean, everything there is delicious. I mean, it's so good. There's such attention to detail and quality. It's wonderful.
The thing that I mustn't overlook by getting it, because there's so many things that we could talk about, but as far as your trips, if people are interested in those, how do they contact you? What should they do? And
Well, just call me at the Mozzarella Company or go online, Mozzco, MOZZCO/travel. And all my trips are there, my little brochures that I make myself.
You're so multi-talented. And so many of those are coming up. Do you and Stephen have another cruise scheduled?
Yes, Stephen and I are going on a cruise to the Baltic right now in August. And then we will be doing a trip to Cuba next March. And in May of 2019, we're doing a river cruise down the Rhone through Burgundy. Woo!
Now, Vicki, I'd like for you to jump in on this, because I know you've spent far more time in France than I have with all of your wonderful years with American Airlines. This is something you and I ought to talk about, the Rhone trip in May of 2019. What do you think?
Yes, I think that we should. We know how to travel.
Yeah, what would you like to ask Paula about that? Because I said I wanted to
About
get you
Rhone?
involved about Rhone, about the trip, so forth.
I want to ask Paula a question, not about the trip. Why don't you make buffalo mozzarella?
Oh, great question. It's because buffalo mozzarella is made from the milk of water buffaloes. We don't have any water buffaloes in Texas from which I could get milk.
You mean that's not because it's made in Buffalo?
It's not an American bison, and it's not made in Buffalo, New York. So in Italy, they call the mozzarella that's made from cow's milk fior di latte. That means flower of the milk.
Delightful. Anything else?
Excellent. What do you think the difference is with the taste?
Well, the taste of the water buffalo mozzarella is much more distinct. It's a little gamier, and it's also very rich. It has 8% butterfat in that milk, and regular cow's milk has 4%.
Okay.
But it's delicious. One thing, I created the Mozzarella Company because I loved mozzarella and tomato salad. It's called Insalata Caprese, and that means it's the salad that comes from the Isle of Capri. And on the Isle of Capri, they only have cow's milk mozzarella.
Very nice. Now, Vicki has another question.
I was just going to say that if people have seen Paula's salad on their menus and never were quite sure about that this is the Paula of Paula's salad.
It makes me so embarrassed. Dean told me one time that he was going to put my name on the menu at the mansion. This is that long ago. And I said, oh, no, don't do that. I would just be too embarrassed. Now I would beg.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, that's a very good point. Are there any other restaurants you want to mention where people will be sampling your cheese when they?
Oh yes,
Some that you can recall.
Sevy's. You know, I love Jim Severson. He has been a loyal customer. Stephen Piles. There's so many. The Mansion. I just love all my customers so much.
And people can come and see you at your wonderful, iconic little factory, your little store, your little manufacturing plant in Deep Ellum.
It's just what I've always wanted it to be. It's where you walk in the front door and you're just practically in the factory where everyone is making cheese by hand. I love it when people bring their children and their children can look through those clear plastic curtains and see milk becoming cheese. I love it. I mean, I think it's very important for us to know where our products are made, and it's a way to do that.
You know, I'll admit this, true confessions, I was an adult before I realized the meaning of Little Miss Muffet sat on her tuffet eating her curds and whey.
I know.
And I had that epiphany at the Mozzarella Company.
Oh, yay, because we have curds and whey.
But no spiders.
No.
But you also do some fun classes for people who can come and sample your cheese and see the cheese making. And
We just have a great time. We have cheese making classes twice a month on Saturday afternoons, and people come and they don aprons and hairnets and they make mozzarella and ricotta and take it home, and then we have a cocktail party. It's very good.
what's not to like?
Very good. But this last weekend, we had a couple from New Zealand that came to make cheese.
Okay. So were they making New Zealand cheese or your cheese?
No, they'd never made mozzarella before.
They would, of course, be making goat cheese if they were making cheese in New Zealand.
That's right.
Well, speaking of your little factory, that beautiful, wonderful, iconic tree that stands in front of the Mozzarella Company, which is really sort of your talisman, I think, for tell a little bit of that story, the saga of saving the tree.
The saga of saving the tree. My husband, Jim Lambert, was a landscape architect, and he gave me a tree, a little twig of a sweet gum tree in 1982 to plant in front of my factory. And so I nourished it, I watered it, I took care of this tree. And as the years progressed, the tree grew, and so did my company. And as I would go and give talks here and there, I'd say, look at my tree, see how it's grown. It's grown just like my factory. And then all of a sudden, the city of Dallas decided that they wanted to redo Elm Street and make it more urban and nicer and beautiful sidewalks with benches and bricks and all this fancy kind of stuff. And so I called the city to say, how are you going to protect my tree while you're doing all this construction? And they said, well, we're cutting down your tree. And I said, what is the symbol of my company? You can't do that. And so they said, yes, we can. And so I had the head engineer come out, and he was a very, very nice man. And I said, I've just got to save this tree. How can I do it? And he said, lady, there's no way to save the tree. The only suggestion I could give you is you could save it politically. And so I thought, well, I've met Mike Rollins. Maybe I could call him. And then I thought, no, I'm going to call my city councilman, Adam Medrano, and I'm going to see if Adam will help me. And he saved my tree.
All right. I thought you were going to say you had your tree run for Congress. And then a political action campaign came along and saved the tree.
But it was like
The tree party.
Yes, their platform was all sweet gum all the time.
well, they told me that it was not a good tree. It was not worth saving, blah, blah, blah. That it didn't have a nice crown. Well, the reason it didn't have a nice crown was the city had come by so many times to cut off the top.
Well, I noticed that the other day while we were shooting some video at the Mozzarella Company, that it's a little ungangly at the top. It looks like the city's been out there whacking away, otherwise known as...
I don't know, but that tree lives. I love it.
It is beautiful. They haven't come back to hassle you about that, have they?
No, but I mean, I've fought for that tree more than once.
Good for you. Talk about some of the wonderful groups that you're involved with. IACP you've mentioned, and La Dame d'Escoffier.
Yes. Well, I've always been involved with a lot of groups. I have enjoyed all the people I've met through these various organizations, and the IACP is one, the International Association of Culinary Professionals. And it has cookbook authors, it has marketing people, it has food photographers, it has TV people. Julia Child was a big part of that. She founded that with some other people because she was a cooking school teacher. And it has a great group of members from all over the United States. And that has been a wonderful organization I've been involved in. Remember when we had the event out at the Anatole Hotel in 2005, and you did all the things to help us. It was wonderful. Then the AIWF that we talked about before, the American Institute of Wine and Food, we had a chapter of that here. We have Les Dames d'Escoffier, which is a group of women worldwide that are in the food and wine and hospitality business, and we all raise funds for scholarships, culinary and wine scholarships. Just a lot of good things.
A lot of good things indeed that are not only good for the food community, but the community at large.
Another one I like is the Women for Wine Sense. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of them. Things to be involved in.
And you give so much of your time and your product to help groups around with food and wine events. You helped Vicki and me so much with Savor Dallas.
That was wonderful, Savor Dallas. And, we had fun, remember, out there at the State Fair.
Oh, yeah. Many years, folks. We did the Jim White Celebrity Kitchen and had great cooking classes.
Oh, I know.
5 or 6 a day.
And all your radio shows have been great, Jim.
Well, the most wonderful thing about that, there are two things. Number one are the wonderful people, the personalities, the friendships I've made, such as yourself. I've known you since the beginning of that. That's how I met you, was doing that. So I'll always be grateful that I had the means by which to meet wonderful people like you, which I never would have met if I hadn't been doing a food and wine show. And then number two, kind of a secondary benefit, I've learned a lot about food and wine, and when Vicki and I cook or pair wine with a meal, it's usually a pretty darn good match.
Good. That's nice to know.
Yeah, because of that. Now, you've 3 books. You've had 3 books, I believe. Is there anything?
2.
Oh, 2 books?
Only 2.
It seems as if there are 3. They're so voluminous and useful. But is there anything new like that on the horizon? Maybe about incorporating your travels or exploits? Or?
No, I'm not thinking of another book. I'm just inviting you to come along with me on some of these trips because they're just so much fun.
I think that would be delightful. Well, that was a sort of a way to get into this question about food trends. You're so up to date on what's happening, and especially with all of your travel to Europe, Italy, and France, and so forth, Ireland, all these other wonderful places, the trips with Stephen. What kind of trends are you seeing? What can we be looking for here in the heartland?
Well, I think it's the same. It's local, it's fresh, it's sustainable. It's the same thing all over the world. They're going back to the basics, and I think there's more appreciation because of education, because of interest in food and wine.
Well, please keep up the wonderful work you're doing at Mozzarella Company, and let us know about new cheeses. And folks, you can catch up at any time, mozco.com. And you're just delightful for joining us here as our guest gourmet this month, and Mrs. Vicki BRILEY-WHITE. Yes, ma'am?
I just want to remind people that you too can buy this cheese. Paula ships cheese all over the United States. So please, maybe around the world, I'm not sure. I don't want to commit that. But you can also do that.
Yes. Go to Mozzco.com, Mozzco.com.
Perfect. Vicki, thank you so much, sweetheart, for being with us. And Paula, thank you for giving so generously of your time and being with us as our guest gourmet this month.
Oh, it's been a great pleasure. Thank you so much.
And folks, thank you for joining us. And remember, if anybody asks you what you're making for dinner, tell them reservations.